her ear. She couldn't tell if it was a person or a shadow-shrouded monster. This is not the end. If the woman had gotten her wish, if she had been Mira born, she would have felt them plucking her life thread from the tangle of her other threads. She'd have watched them trace her life thread up, where it stretched toward the ceiling, disappearing into the sky above. She'd have seen them take one of their own threads, stretching it between two fingers, silver and sharp as steel. But the woman only heard snap, and the thread was cut. Chapter 1. Fraying. Io stood at the edge of the roof, trying to convince herself to take the first step. She had explained it 1,000 times. It wasn't heights she was afraid of, but rather edges. She had no problem riding the trolley. She could tap dance across terraces, but she would have to halt, take a few deep breaths, and mentally coax herself in order to cross a hanging bridge. "Little idiot," her sister Thais would say when Io was younger. "You're Mira born. You can see the threads of fate. Do you see your life thread fraying anytime soon?" Sharing a knowing look, Thais and their other sister, Ava, would then tackle Io to the ground. All three of them wrestled, limbs tangled and grins feral, until Io admitted defeat. Ava would draw Io's life thread out and give it a couple of tugs. It stretched like a chain of silver and shone just as bright. "Look at that," Thais would chide. "Strong as ever." "She likes being afraid," Ava would chuckle, "so that she has a reason to do nothing." And young Io would whine every time. "I do not!" How she hated to whine. It was their fault. They treated her like a child, so like a child she behaved. The girls' parents, before their deaths, had worked at the Neraida Plains out of the city, leaving their daughters to care for themselves from a young age. Thais, the oldest, took on the role of warden, cleaning and cooking and managing their money, while Ava, 2 years younger, busied herself with fun, inventing games to occupy their time and reading people's fortunes for a little extra cash. And so Io, the youngest, born 6 years after Ava, became the baby, looked after and teased. One soul, split in 3 bodies, they whispered conspiratorially, heads huddled together in their shared bed. Of course, that was years ago, before Thais left town, before everything changed. Io stepped carefully onto the bridge. It bounced under her weight, groaning with every step. Not really designed for humans, this bridge. It was a long, thin strip of metal built specifically for cats, to allow them a way to roam the city during the flooded high tides, the city's master plan to curb the growing population of rodents that carried diseases through the streets. The problem with these cat bridges was that they had no railings. Cats don't lose their balance, the city officials declared. But that wasn't true. Cats could slip and fall like any other creature. They just tended to land on their feet. Io thought the whole thing was counterintuitive. There was nothing to land on under the bridge, only murky tidewater, which, as already established, cats hate. There should have been railings. There weren't. A statement that pretty much summed up the sunken city of Alante, in Io's opinion. Needs were never met. People demanded, were denied, and learned to make do with what they had. Io had no railings, but she had fear. Lots of it. She wrapped it around her, clutched tight like a shield. Here's what her sisters never grasped. Fear didn't numb you. It made you cautious, alert. Io was always, always alert. That was why she excelled at this job. She walked with small, methodical steps across the bridge, puffing her cheeks out in relief when she stood on solid ground again. The roof hatch of the abandoned theater had been boarded up haphazardly. Io slipped through with ease. Mold and rot hit her nostrils as she followed the stairs down, a hand on the wall to guide her through the heavy darkness. Moonlight silvered the grand.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.